the shows. And we're going to go right here to our check-in. And Maria, if you want to go ahead and throw up my comment saying, you know, everybody check in. And come over to Facebook and kick off our Facebook Go Live. Here we go. And I'm going to kick off the teleprompter. So I'm excited, guys. We got Kevin here. We got Derek on the line from IP Architects. This is going to be an exciting show today, and I'm excited about the mum. So we are live, by the way. Everybody at home, wave, say hi. How's it going? We've got people coming in all the way from Serbia.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, they're staying up late tonight.
No kidding. That's a bit of a time gap.
But I guess, you know, I guess if you're into networking, right, I mean, there is no off time, right? You're just like all hours of the day.
Yeah, no, all time zones are in play.
Yeah. When I did some stuff, I used to get calls. I'm doing IT, a little bit of IT support, just a little. I'm definitely not you and Derek quality, but when I did a little IT support, you know, 3, 4 in the morning, you're getting calls.
Yeah. Yeah, well, don't sell yourself short. You know, PoE powering a lot of the gear here is that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, okay. And this is a shout out for all of our friends out there. I got so much hassle for not having a PoE theater lighting system for the show that I went out and I bought a PoE. I bought LED lights and I made our own PoE lighting system just for the show today. So that. All right, so we are right now at the top of the hour. And we've got Kevin and Derek from IP Architects on the line. I'm going to get the microphone adjusted so Kevin can be heard because he's so valuable. And we are going to get started here. So let's jump over and get the Converge PoE live stream started at 11 a.m. Central Time. And thank you all for joining us. All right. So welcome to the turn off this title here. Welcome to the PoE Texas's live stream Converge PoE. If you're interested in getting the most out of your network and are doing anything with enterprise level architecture, especially if you're using Microtech, I can say it right, believe me, you're in the right place. As many of you know, or will shortly know, this week the Microtech users meeting is coming to Austin. And it's an event that we look forward to every year. Last year was in Baltimore. This year it is right here in Austin, Texas, and we're so excited. It's not the biggest show out there, but it's a highly concentrated show of internet service providers, a lot of WISPs, and tech champions. Guys like Kevin, guys like Derek, and you're going to meet a lot of other guys. Lynn Hag is there. He's a great guy. He's from Austin. We're so excited to hang out with him out there. So shout out to Lynn if you're watching today. And what we did is we managed to snag a couple of top network architecture guys. Kevin is in huge demand, and we literally had to go Black Ops and hog tie him and drag him here to the studio today. Just kidding.
That's what Vader's for, right?
Yeah, that's why
the enforcer.
That's why Vader is here today, making sure he's our security. And we're also going to be talking about arcane PoE standards. And I don't mean arcane as the old PoE standard. I'm talking arcane as in standards that you may not know about if you're just a traditional PoE user. And that's very exciting. So break out your toughest questions and send them over the chats, whether on Facebook or on YouTube, to Maria. We have Maria manning the chat lines and to make sure your questions get answered. And give us your input on what tough projects you would like to learn about so we can do follow-up videos on what you want to know about, and I'll get Kevin and Derek to help me with some of them. A big one that I know a lot of people ask for is setting up a network for a small business or a home. So I'll probably be asking you guys about getting tips about that and how to do it.
Sure.
So let me prompt you with the first question, and this is for everybody out there. Have you ever burnt out a device using the wrong PoE? What was it? And I'll reveal my burnouts. I almost did a burnout today. So stick around for exclusive announcements on what's happening here in Austin for the mum and brand new products that will change how we do business, both from our PoE Texas products and a couple of Microtech products that you guys are going to be bringing out today. So with that, let's go ahead and get the show started. I'll get this. So let me swap this over so I can introduce Maria really quick. Most of you already know me, Tyler Andrews, the CEO here at PoE Texas, and the big nerd. Derek was calling us nerds today, and I took that quite as a compliment. And my lovely co-host, Miss Maria Medell, who will introduce our guest stars.
Yeah, so hi everyone. We're very excited today to welcome Kevin Myers here in person and Derek Anderson via video to the show today. Derek and Kevin are both part of the IP Architects team in Jackson, Mississippi. Kevin is a network architect and Derek handles worldwide architecture technical sales. Try to say that 10 times fast. It's a mouthful.
Yep.
Kevin's career has allowed him to visit 6 out of the 7 continents. If you want to guess which one, throw it in the comment below. Derek has worked on some really large-scale projects, such as a 190,000 concurrent user guest Wi-Fi, all for under $20,000. And that was in September 2014, and then also a 250,000 concurrent user virtual private network concentrator between May and June of 2014. So while Kevin spends most of his time consulting and designing hybrid WISP or wireline networks, he also has the time to maintain his own network engineering blog. And together they have both been with IP Architects for nearly 12 years. So we're very glad that they're able to join us today. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we got
Thank
Derek
you.
and Kevin. Yeah. So we're sorry, I'm terrible at giving you guys time. Do you want to say anything to our live audience? And just
I would say,
hi?
hi. Thank you. I would say thanks so much to Maria and Tyler for having us here. It actually worked out that we were able to come into the studio here in Austin, so that was great. And come see you guys and hang out, talk a little bit nerdy, a little bit PoE, a little bit of Microtech, and so we're really happy to be here and kind of talk about what's coming up in the world of WISP and network engineering and PoE.
Fantastic. And Derek, thank you for making time on your phone or to come in through a live stream. You're coming out of Colorado, right?
I am. I'll fly down there tomorrow, and you know what I'm preparing for our party.
Yes.
We have to manufacture 80 of them today.
Spoiler alert! Derek is spoiling the fact that PoE Texas and IP Architect are co-hosting a big party at the MUM on Thursday night at 6:30. But we will get to that. Let's not spoil that. And
Okay.
and you can only imagine that Derek is. I'll tell you what, man. He's his own man creating assets for a party. So you're gonna nerd out with us. So guys, we're really excited to have you on our live stream today. To get yourself more familiar to our audience out there. Why don't you guys each take a turn and just share a little something personal about how or why you got started into designing network architecture at this enterprise level?
Okay, sure.
So I'm going to tee it up with, let's start with Kevin.
Yeah, for sure. So my background goes back to about the late 90s when I got into IT and started, as a lot of people do, as kind of a jack-of-all-trades IT guy working on a little bit of everything, a little bit of network, a little bit of servers and PCs. And that kind of got into a career where I was going into larger environments and enterprise and things like that. And that was my life for about 8 or 9 years. And then I kind of made a very definitive shift where I realized that networking is what I really love. That's where I really wanted to be. And so I started looking for opportunities to get into network engineering, and just so happened that I was able to go work for a local telco. And so one of the other founders of IP Architects, Scott Hammersley, who's not on here, he and I also worked together at the same telco, and we spent a number of years learning how to build infrastructure for just about everything you would do in an ISP. Fiber optic, DSL, backbone networking, 911. I mean, pretty much anything that goes into a critical communications infrastructure was something that we learned how to do, and we eventually decided to go into consulting in that realm. And before we did that, we actually spent some time, we both spent some time at a Fortune 500 enterprise doing their global architecture for pretty much the entire world. Is about an 80,000 employee network. And so we spent a lot of time dealing with very, very large scale enterprise problems, as well as learning about the service provider world. So with that background kind of split between those two environments, we went into consulting and started tackling some of those problems for other companies. And specifically, one of the things that we focused on was using MikroTik, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and then also getting into the world of Whitebox, which we'll also talk about in a little bit. And that is a very specific focus our consulting firm has in tackling these challenges at scale is how do I solve these problems at a much lower cost and capital expenditure than if I go with a traditional networking vendor. And so that's something that IP Architects spends a lot of time trying to solve that problem and build stable, scalable networks at maybe 80% less than the capital expenditure of a Cisco or Juniper network. So that's kind of my 60-second background on who I am and where I came from.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's do the same thing, Derek. We want to hear from you, buddy. How did you get into this business?
Mine is considerably less dramatic. Well, so I came here as a customer. I still have a national voice company. I come from the voice background, and I needed a QoS device, which I landed on MikroTik, and then I figured out I determined I could not make them do what I needed to do, and I started seeking out consultants. When I met these guys, it was very clear to me that there was a need for talent in a marketplace where people want to use low-cost solutions and actually have confidence that they made the right choice across time and their business value is not impaired. So all I really talked myself into a position with these guys is let me see if I can create that message for you and let these guys do what they are innately capable at, which is doing high-level things that work type of decision making for companies that want to take advantage of low-cost products and not feel like they're putting their business at risk by doing so. That was my simple origin, and that was 6 years ago, and here we are still doing the same thing, because at the end of the day, everyone who uses these products, your business is important to you. And that is what probably is the definition of professionalism is, and that's maybe why we're still here today.
Fantastic. Well, speaking of professionalism, I have this image burned in my mind of being at WISP America and having this scary looking dude in a poncho come up behind me and go, "What's up?" And I turn around and I realize it's you, man. It's you, Derek. So if you're curious who the scary looking dude in a poncho is running around your trade shows,
yeah,
my hoodie.
It's that guy. All right. Well, guys, what's interesting, I think what it could be interesting for a lot of our audience is, let's say I'm new to MikroTik. I mean, we'll put it out there. You guys have said you're big MikroTik users. And let's say I'm new to MikroTik products. Where would I start to even learn about MikroTik?
So I think one of the best places to learn about MikroTik is just by starting at their site. There's a wealth of resources if you want, if you're looking at MikroTik or considering MikroTik, go to their site and look at the product portfolio and look at some of the videos on YouTube that have been posted from previous conferences, as well as the forums and a number of other resources that will kind of get you into, what is MikroTik. And there's also a number of unofficial forums on Facebook. There's an unofficial Facebook group. LinkedIn, you can find a number of different MikroTik user groups where they all kind of talk about how they use MikroTik's products in a number of different verticals. The wireless internet service provider industry is very, very, very common, very entrenched in the MikroTik world. But enterprises and data centers are starting to use MikroTik, and some of them have been using it for a very long time. We see it heavily used in the energy space, in the utility space. So oil, gas, energy, water, any kind of utilities are finding that they can embed MikroTik's products into the global energy infrastructure to solve problems like I want to be able to read a meter, I want to be able to connect these devices together. So we've seen it in government and military applications. And so really, just like any other network vendor, like Cisco or Juniper or some of these other mainstream vendors that people have used for years and years and years, MikroTik has built a number of products that solve a lot of the same challenges that those do. And so people are starting to find out that not only do they work, and they work very well, they also are, the cost differential between, some of the mainstream network products and what MikroTik is producing is just massive. We can take a router that costs $150 and run a data center and run the internet edge of a data center. Whereas to do that in another vendor, I may spend $30,000 or $40,000 to solve that same challenge. So the cost gap is vast, and so that's one of the things that gets people into MikroTik. And then, as Derek pointed out, it's okay. Well, this is too good to be true. This is so cheap. How could this possibly work? And so one of the things I like to say is it's not always the right fit for every single use case. And one of the first things you have to understand is this the right fit for my use case? And then once you understand that, then you can look at, okay, how do I implement this? How does it work? And then one of the things we specialize in is if you are trying to figure out the safer path to how do I take this $100 router and put it into critical infrastructure, that's one of the things that we specialize in. But certainly the resources that we put out, Stub Area 51 is a blog, stubarea51.net is a blog that I've got that has a lot of shout out
guys.
Shout out for stubarea51.net and at stubarea51 on Twitter. There's a lot of network engineering stuff that we do that's a lot of it's MikroTik, some of it's white box and some other things. And then actually this may be a good time to kind of define that those terms so that people understand MikroTik.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what is, when you say white box, what does white box mean for you at IP Architect?
So this is something that MikroTik kind of fits into this puzzle. So if you think back to computers in the 1980s, we had IBM mainframes, and if you wanted an IBM mainframe, then you were going to go to IBM and purchase that hardware, and the only choice you had for software was to go to IBM and buy the software that runs on that mainframe. Well, then you fast forward to the late 80s and the early 90s, and we had this thing called x86 and the computer revolution, and suddenly I can buy a motherboard and a computer that I could put Windows on, or I could put DOS or Linux on, or all these different options. And so they kind of broke apart the hardware and the software model to the point where you can choose what you want to put on and buy them independently. Networking has not really gone through that revolution until the last 7 or 8 years. And so there's a couple different segments of it. One of it's called white box, and another is called commodity. And so basically the difference between those two terms is, in the last 30 years in network engineering, the chips that go into the routers and switches and all the network gear have largely been R&D'd and developed and made by the manufacturers, by Cisco, by Juniper. It's not something they buy off the shelf. But in the last 10 years, those have become available from the manufacturers. People like Broadcom and Mellanox and people like that have made those available. So some of the industry giants like Facebook and Google and those kinds of companies had the idea that, well, if the guys in the server world can do this and separate their hardware and software, why can't we do that? And so that's what became the white box revolution, which MikroTik kind of fits in, because MikroTik, you still do have to get the software with the hardware, but the difference is they use commodity silicon, they use commodity hardware. So rather than spending all millions or tens of millions or billions in R&D'ing their own hardware, they'll go to a silicon manufacturer and get something that's pre-manufactured and then wrap the software around it. And that's what we call commodity. And commodity and white box are kind of like in the same family, even though they're different things. Whereas white box, you buy the hardware and select the software that you want. Commodity just means that you're leveraging, commodity silicon that's been built and designed by somebody else. And so that's where MikroTik fits. And so this whole family and this idea of, they call it open networking as a general term, that we're going to open up networking to make it less expensive and lower the barriers to entry. So that's what I mean when I use terms like commodity and white box, where they come from and why they're relevant.
Very cool, very cool. And I see Maria is madly working away at to the chat line. Keep the chats coming, guys. But Maria, did you want to tee up a question for Kevin and Derek?
Yeah, so just to start, I guess, with the MikroTik, what do you find are the benefits, aside from the cost effectiveness you mentioned? What are some other benefits of installing a MikroTik infrastructure versus another brand, another standard?
Yeah, sure. So I think probably one of the things that I think is the most interesting about MikroTik is it is one of the lowest power consuming devices that you can find out there. So in a lot of developing parts of the world, we find that people have to rely on solar, like South Africa right now. South Africa is going through a huge energy crisis. They're facing an almost total collapse of their electrical grid because of issues that they're having. And so a lot of the enterprises, data centers, and vendors there are looking at building solar solutions and off-grid solutions to power the entire internet and data center infrastructure. Wow. So in a lot of places in the world, if power is a major concern, and it is, you can actually use a MikroTik router and consume probably a fraction of what you would with another vendor. So that's just one example of a use case that you could use. And MikroTik actually has some really interesting capabilities that Cisco and Juniper and other vendors don't have. Being able to manage the router at layer 2 without putting an IP address on it is something that a lot of people find very useful about MikroTik, especially if you have a network outage. There's a way to get to these devices, whereas instead of having to drive 4 hours, you may be able to remotely manage it, whereas you wouldn't be able to with another vendor. And scale. Scale is another, and this kind of does play back into cost, but if you have a project that needs a massive amount of scale. We have there's a utility provider, it's actually in Texas, that's got several 100,000 power meters that they needed connectivity to. And they just could not meet that scale challenge with any other vendor other than MikroTik, because when you're buying several 100,000 network devices, if it's several thousand per network device, that becomes a prohibitive cost exercise.
Right.
So there's probably 100 other things I could go through, but those are just a few of the things that we see people when they make the choice for MikroTik as to why they choose that form factor.
So I'm going to play it back to make sure I've understood.
Yep.
Cost, obviously, the barrier, lowering that barrier to entry, key aspect of the MikroTik product line.
Yes.
It sounds like also there is an element of management and control where MikroTik is offering key features that other suppliers aren't offering. And would that hold true also for Ubiquiti? Because when I talk to a lot of my guys and everybody's chatting online, for example, Rob from the Hookup, I'm a subscriber of him, love his show. He asks his audience, first thing everybody says is Ubiquiti.
Yep.
And I imagine, on the enterprise level, you ask the big guys, the first thing they say when you say what network architecture you're going to go with, there's that saying, nobody's ever been fired for putting in Cisco.
Sure.
So we're asking people to kind of step out of what the mainstream is. What is it? And so you're saying it's because MikroTik can offer those features. Now, coming back to my question, does that mean it offers features that even Ubiquiti hardware doesn't offer?
Yeah, that's correct. I think Ubiquiti sits kind of in between MikroTik and the Cisco and Junipers of the world as far as how they're designed and what they're going after. So what we find is generally MikroTik is a lot stronger in in what we call layer 3 routing and some of the switching, depending on what you're trying to do. Whereas Ubiquiti's strengths, a lot of their RF, they've got some strengths there in the way they build their RF gear, their wireless access points, and their point-to-point links. There's definitely some product offerings they have that MikroTik doesn't have. And so what we find in the wild in a lot of networks is people will use Ubiquiti for certain components like in the wireless space and for some of those other products and applications, whereas in what I would call layer 1 and layer 2 in the network model, and then in layer 3 in routing, people will often choose MikroTik because they both solve those problems better than the other. And it depends on what part of the world you're in too. The deployments we see in North America and the vendor choice, where we see a big mix of MikroTik and Ubiquiti, is not the same thing we see in South America or in Africa. We see different vendors being chosen because the environment is different, the geography is different, the economics are different. And so that's an important bit of context as well, is that where you are in the world matters as to what your network design is. Very cool.
Well, and Derek, I heard you in the background. Do you want to weigh in on this one?
No, I'm being teased for how I look. So it's okay. No, one thing I will say is that just dealer logistics. We don't sell products, so we don't have to get involved with this, but our customers will come to us with whatever they can obtain. And if they can get Ubiquiti, it's Ubiquiti. If they get MikroTik, it's MikroTik. It doesn't really matter to us, but sometimes it's just easier to get certain products in different parts of the world.
That's a very good point, and that is an interesting dynamic about MikroTik. And I agree with you guys. When I've looked at MikroTik and I've looked at other products, MikroTik is a much bigger product outside the United States, and consequently, 24-volt PoE is much more common and used. That's where we see it as people come to us internationally with 24-volt PoE questions. So that's a very interesting thing. Do you think that trend of MikroTik being more outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. is going to continue, or do you think you're going to start seeing a shift based on certain factors?
Question.
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, I think a lot of it for MikroTik is I think they do care about the U.S. market, and they want in the U.S. market a lot of the things they do, especially in the RF space. There's regulatory compliance and things that they have to go through, and I think from what I understand, it's a little bit easier in some of the other countries to go through the regulatory compliance process as far as the cost of certification and all of that. So oftentimes you'll find that MikroTik will offer something, but they may be a year or two behind another competitor just because of the cost of the compliance to go through the FCC and things like that. And so that's what we'll see a lot of times in the U.S. market. And that almost exclusively applies to the RF space, because the wired routers and switches, although you do have electrical compliance, it's not quite the same thing as the RF. So I think that's one of the biggest differences that I see, is why you see so much of it around the world is really just the compliance process.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Derek, your point about availability is true. which is ironic. And I should have pulled up this picture. I've got this picture when I was in Riga, Latvia. I happened to be there, and I look up on the wall and I see the U of Ubiquity beaming the data across an alley, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
But so that's very interesting. Derek, do you want to weigh in on this question about where's the future going for MikroTik? Are they going to be building in the U.S. or should we just are we going to expect to see them continue to be dominant outside, or do you think somebody else is going to be hunting to try and take over some of that MikroTik business outside the U.S.?
To be honest, I think MikroTik's so small here because it sounds too good to be true to some people. Like there's no way that it does it, because it has been just as much of an obstacle when I suggest MikroTik is a solution to a large enterprise where money isn't a problem. They don't really care if they save money. That's part of it. And the United States just looks at it. It's like if they raised their price, they would have more faith in the brand. I don't know how else to put it. We have some regulatory issues where MikroTik will be stronger in other countries because U.S. products will be tariffed. That's why you see Brazil in particular. There's tariffs that don't exist when you're a Latvian company that do exist when you're a U.S. company. So you're going to see some certain foreign markets just have a weakened demand for what U.S. technology companies have.
Great.
And
I was going to say one point on that, Derek, I think too is important to mention is the market is changing for enterprises, and I think for companies in general of being receptive to going with commodity and white box solutions, because we are starting to see a softening in that market. And like a great highlight that really is neither MikroTik or anything else that just highlights that trend is Kroger, largest grocer in the United States. They have what, Derek, like 4,000 stores, I think. I think it was the Ohio Networking User Group. They just demoed the fact that they had ripped out all of their brand name routers at some of their stores and put in what was essentially a Linux box with open networking platform, because they were able to get exactly the things that they wanted, that they cared about in there. And 10 years ago, that would have been unheard of, to just take an open source box powering, your critical infrastructure for your entire multi-billion-dollar enterprise. But they realized, because of the work that Google and Facebook and these pioneering companies have done in lowering the cost of infrastructure, and not just lowering the cost of infrastructure, but also being in charge of your own destiny, which is another big thing about this whole open networking environment, is I want to be in charge of what features I have and what I put into my network. And I don't want to be at the whim of some vendor that says, you need this or this or this. I want to have more of a choice. And so companies are softening up to this idea of the commodity and the white box networking that MikroTik plays a role in, that Ubiquity plays a role in, that these other companies play a role in. And so I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be a very different landscape than what we see today.
And, from a PoE perspective, I would certainly agree with that, because one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to help, and I'm going to, using your term, commoditize the PoE. But the idea being is that rather than try and make a vertical where you have to get from the switch to from the even the switching equipment to get the service, to the routing, to all the way down to what you're hanging up as a Wi-Fi access point, you've got this vertical where you go down the line and say, I'm going to be this guy, being able to pick the right product and the right service. And that's where PoE Texas plays as well, because our product lines are designed to be more of that white box opportunity where you could say, I need a specific application for PoE, and my switching equipment I want different things for. And that's an important feature. We agree with you. So on that, we feel like we're in a line.
The interoperability piece of being able to substitute whatever component you need.
Exactly. And the key here is get exactly, like you were talking about with Kroger, get exactly what you need, rather than having to sacrifice and just put up with what you can get because you go with a certain, you're buying a box that's trying to solve the problems for 1 million people, rather than buying a box that solves your problem. I guess that's kind of, now we're talking that long tail principle. There may not be 1 million people who need exactly what Kroger needs.
Sure.
But Kroger needs what they need. And there are enough Krogers out there and enough of us smaller people who are doing business that we find that application. And so it sounds like MikroTik is an interesting fit. Now I'm going to ask Maria, how are we doing on the chat lines? Are people coming in? You want to let's throw them in. We want to make sure we love our audience. And this is, by the way, Kevin and Derek, this is the exciting part about a live stream, is these guys are going to guide the conversation, and we're going to be able to give you what they want to hear, not just what we want to hear.
Sure.
We'll throw up a few comments just from the beginning of the show just to say hi to those watching. So Ben said he just discovered the company and he's excited to see what everyone offers.
Thanks
for watching, Ben. And then Tom had a fun question, I believe, for either one of you, I think. Let me throw it up here.
Is there a way to monitor the power used from a PoE device? That's a great question, and the simple answer is definitely.
Absolutely.
I'll throw two options out there. And I apologize, I should have had this ready. And this is Tom, right? I'm talking to Tom?
Yes, this is for Tom.
Tom, two ideas for you. One is called our PoE tester, and it's a little pocket-sized handheld device you plug in from your switch or your router, PoE device, into the top, and then you plug out from the bottom into your whatever device you're powering, whether it's a Wi-Fi access point or a camera. It passes through the data, and it will measure the power. And so that's a very handy tool. Now, I'm also, if it's all right, guys, I'm going to swap over, and I'm going to show you the next option, which is very cool, and I'm very excited about. And I apologize. I'm going to nerd out here with you guys real quick. So here we go. I'm going to swing over to this screen, and I'm going to add our camera here. This is my second camera. And this has a couple of our products that we're going to do, but I'm gonna loosen it up here, and I'm going to tilt it up and show you this guy. That you can see this is our PoE switch. And what I like about this switch is it will do the same thing as a PoE tester, but it's integrated right on board. And if I could zoom in, I should have had a zoom on this. You could see it'll measure the current output, it'll measure the power output, and it will measure the data throughput. And it's manageable with the buttons on the screen, and I like that. And we've got it in A port right now retailing, but if you guys wanted it in 16, 24, same situation applies, and it's a PoE Plus switch. So that was a great question, Tom. Derek or Kevin, do you guys, I'm going to turn off the camera here and swap us back. Do you guys have any questions about what that looks like for a switch? Because I know you guys have standards on what you're looking for.
Yeah, sure. I think so. Yeah, I mean, this one is new for me in your product line, so I think that's very exciting. And having the metrics on the outside of it to be able to look at the power is something we found helpful in a lot of devices that offer that that type of monitoring. So I think what form factors are you guys exploring? Is this one that you guys have just come out with as far as
Yes.
the switch?
Yes.
Because this is not where you have like a layer 1 device that's actually just front ending an Ethernet switch. This is an all-in-one Ethernet switch that you guys are putting out, where I'm assuming you can do VLANs and all those kinds of things.
Well, this is cool. This switch is interesting because it's the middle of the road. It is not a proper layer 2 switch.
Gotcha.
So that's important to state.
Okay.
That's going to be coming out later this year.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we're combining the LCD screen with the layer 2 switch, but it is a higher level of management than just a simple switch.
Okay.
For example, you can manage the PoE, so you can turn up and down the PoE. You can separate all the ports into their own individual VLANs.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which is cool. It does have port monitoring, so you could set it up where it's pinging an IP address automatically, and if it stops getting an answer, it'll shut off that IP address or that port and then turn it back on for you.
Okay.
So I would call it more of that middle of the road between just a dumb layer 1 switch,
Right.
but it's not a full layer 2 management, but it's a nice middle of the road. The idea behind it being the reason why we were excited about this is it bridges that line between I'm not trying to do INGMP snooping. I'm not multicasting. I am not out there driving QoS. I just have stuff I need to do with this, and I want to be able to manage it. It's also good for the guy who's putting in a switch early, where it's going to be for like infrastructure, for lighting, because you can turn on and manage the devices quickly right at the port, without having to have your full network turned up. And I know that takes a while to get a full network turned up and configured.
It does, yeah. And I think another role that you guys might explore for that we will do in our designs a lot is, especially in a WISP network at a more critical tower location, we will use a more capable Ethernet switch to form the core, because there are some of the advanced features you talked about that we need. We may need IGMP snooping, we may need per VLAN traffic shaping, or some of these really high-end advanced features. So we will often separate PoE from the core network switch, at a tower level or some other aggregation point, for a couple of reasons. One, functionality, because you get that functionality in the core switch, and then you delegate PoE to a switch that is just facing a radio or some other PoE powered device, but also because you can get electrical isolation too if you have a fiber module in between. So one of the very early tenets of our network design in telco is you always isolate anything that is outside from the core of the network via whatever way you can, normally fiber, because that provides the electrical isolation. And we've carried that design principle over into WISP networking because that's what telcos do. And so we'll use fiber optic to separate the PoE switches from a core switch, like in a tower aggregation point, so that you just dump that entire task off to that switch and that thing, and it does its job, and the core switch does its job, and everybody is very happy.
Very cool. Actually, should I do it? This is there is a teaser trailer that I was going to present today on that point where we have broken up to this has come to, I can't tell you how many requests I've had saying, Tyler, where's your managed midspan? Where is your managed midspan? And the managed midspan is sitting right here. I'll switch over to it and I'll show that to you guys.
While he's doing that, Tom also had a fun comment about your prison orange colored shirt.
My prison orange. We love our prison orange because it's highly visible. And the one thing I hear at the conferences and the things we go to is you never have to wonder where the IP architects guys are.
True.
And we're good company because PoE Texas uses orange in its accent colors too. So
I would have gone more to traffic cone, I think.
Instead
of prison.
It's a great way to flag us down, or we could be a traffic cone, or stand in a data center and direct traffic. Either way.
So this is now we're talking the orange because we got to do it.
Sure.
And we believe in orange too. Derek, what do you think about your prison orange shirt there?
I've got orange USB cables. It's my favorite color, so this works out for me every day.
Okay.
But the jumpsuit, it has given me an idea.
No. Now, I will say, I do need to take 1 second
uniform
to settle a long-standing 7-year dispute. Derek up in Denver maintains that the orange and the blue that we use is because of the Denver Broncos, which is absolutely false.
Oh, okay. It's Tennessee.
I went to Auburn University, who is in the Final Four now, by the way,
Okay.
so War Eagle. And so that is where the company colors come from, so that we can settle this on recorded media for posterity and history between Derek and I.
This is we're going to be archived on YouTube
For the record.
and Facebook, which means it will
Wikipedia.
never go away. Derek, I'm sorry,
so
man.
no,
It's recorded.
it's
you
settled.
better
I didn't
dispute
start
it now.
It's a solved problem.
All right, that's awesome.
Hey, if no one remembers that, it's not Auburn's fault.
Oh, well, I'll ask you guys to do me a favor, though. Don't go overboard on orange, because in my previous life, I used to do indoor skydiving wind tunnels, and there was a guy in Moscow. He owns an indoor skydiving wind tunnel. The whole thing is your bright orange, but it's like 100 feet tall and 100 feet wide, and you roll up to this thing, and it is just bright orange. So
Yeah.
don't go overboard,
Well, that's where we go. So we were in the Netherlands going to the MUM Europe conference, and that's their official color of the entire country is orange. Everything's orange.
Oh, that's
so we feel very at
right.
home in the
Yeah.
Netherlands. Yeah.
I'll bet you guys are really popular there.
That's great.
Well, let me see if I can swap back over here. And I was going to show this midspan to you guys. All right, so pulling up this midspan. Oop, wrong one. So this guy here is our new midspan that's managed. Unfortunately, I covered it up with these cables. This is our fully managed midspan device. And what's cool about this, and I'll bring up the video in just a second, is it is managed from these touch buttons on the front, because we kept the LCD screen that I like. So you can actually manage every port and all the functionality from the touch screens right on the front, which is really important. Like when you're doing something like a lighting system or an infrastructure system that's different from network architecture, having control right here is really important, because you can just turn it on and off. And what's very cool about it too, that this guy is unique, is we know, and I said lighting because this guy now does 80 watts per port PoE. And I know you and Derek have asked about it, and that's, how do you get the 4-pair PoE, especially when you're doing some of these more unique type applications. You're trying to go, we were talking earlier about the G pen.
Yeah, from Microtech, the new product. Yeah, the distance.
The distance, well, you got to have a lot of watts to get that distance, and that's what this product is designed to do. And very cool, because we designed ours differently from a lot of other people. We integrated passive PoE into it, so you can actually decide whether your ports are going to be active or passive. and whether they're going to be active, passive, 4-pair PoE or PoE plus, and it's all managed through a web interface. And so I'm going to try and throw that up here. And
what's the voltage range on that?
It is designed to work from 44 to 56 volts, the traditional IP rating, because we've noticed that the 4-pair PoE typically goes up to that point. Now, I need to double check now that we're talking about it. Can it do 4-pair PoE 24 volts?
Yeah, because that's a challenge I know a lot of ISPs have when they're having to power gear is, a lot of these radio manufacturers are all over the map when it comes to PoE requirements. So having something that can account for a wide variety of types of PoE, voltage ranges, and options is something that is always seems to be a struggle for ISPs. Is like, where is that one box that I'm, I don't have to have 9 different boxes to power my PoE infrastructure.
And that's going to be really important going forward. And that's going to bring up our question. Well, don't let me. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to ask you a question. Any other questions coming out of the audience here that we should be focusing on?
One from Nick. Nick says there seem to be very few devices that offer both passive PoE and standards based on 802.3 AF PoE options. Even less common is hardened device that supports these. Can you explore that or have any input on that?
All right, guys. So, sorry, what was the name? This is Nick. So Nick is asking the tough question about passive PoE, active PoE, hardened devices.
Combining both onto one.
Being able to combine both into one. What are you guys seeing as the best alternative for that right now? And I'm raising my hands, I PoE Texas, but I want to hear from you guys because that's what our audience really wants to know.
Honestly, I would probably have to defer to you guys on that because getting all of those things into a box, I'm drawing a blank on what would be the box to do that. Derek, what do you think?
Well, in terms of competing products, is that what you're looking for, Tyler?
Well, what's the best solution for passive and active PoE in one device? And I think we're talking about specifically a hardened solution, which is a little bit harder to find just in general for networking equipment. So maybe let's tackle that question. Where do you guys find hardened equipment? And by hardened, I'm assuming, Nick, are you asking about stuff for oil and gas services where you have to have Div 2 Class 1? What is it?
Yeah, there's I'm trying to remember the rating. There's a specific rating when you're talking about hardened equipment, hardened network equipment. It's NIMS or NEBS or something like that, where you're talking about things like humidity, temperature, environmental hardening of the case. Hardening is a pretty vast range of things, but normally in network gear it means that you're going to put this in an environment that is going to fall outside of a closet in an office, in a climate-controlled data center, and maybe subject to, some more extremes. Like Alaska, we do a fair amount of networking up in Alaska. I've got a lot of friends that do networking up in Alaska, and it gets a little cold up there. Then they've got some high winds and some other things. So, that would be, a good example of a hardened environment, or an oil rig offshore in the Gulf would be another hardened environment.
What do you got, Derek?
Packet flux comes to mind as probably being the industrial vendor. The solutions are expensive, but I don't know if it does passive, because passive was introduced by the low end wireless guys, not the microwaves. You didn't find passive from Trango, you found it from Ubiquity. And so I don't know there's the 9-dot out of Italy, which is a different product than what you have, and they do it, but it has a different solution than what you're after. And so the only other vendor I think we can come up with, Kevin, is Nutanix. Yeah, and they do that. I don't know if they do passive on their switch, but certainly they're abundant within the business we're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the question about that passive versus active, I know both MikroTik and Ubiquity do offer switches that'll do both 24 volt and PoE, standard PoE. What I've found is that makes the products very complex and expensive. So to date, we haven't tried to combine everything onto one device. We will typically do something where you can get one or the other, both cost effectively.
Right.
But I'm definitely open for feedback, guys. Chat with us. Send us your feedback. Do you need them on the same thing? Like, does that make a big difference for you in your business? Because we may just be misjudging the situation. And then in terms of hardened, I would say what we need to do is kind of Nick, maybe give us a little bit more.
He did come back and say he wanted more details of doing both, maybe not so much on competing products. And he actually said he was interested in hearing about the PoE Texas specific solution.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll Let me swing back over then. I'll
go back to your little
you...
device, Tyler. You can't introduce us to somebody and then take away the camera.
All right, let me swing over there to it, and I'm gonna open this guy up again. Actually, you know what? Why don't I do a video and you can actually see what's going on here? So I'm gonna bring this up. Let me swap over here to a video here. You can see the product in action. Oh no, I still have my camera. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at the, I'm going to go ahead and restart this video just so you guys can see it from the beginning. All right. So what you're looking here is the back management page of the midspan. And what you can see here is that will turn off and on the power for each port. And then you can control each device. And then this allows you to turn on or off 4-pair PoE and turn it on or off passive PoE. So what you could do is you could opt to go with 4-pair passive PoE, or you could opt to go to 2-pair PoE, which is really important, active or passive. And the benefit for that is, from our perspective, is I know guys like Airfiber, Mimosa, I mean, you know, the radio world, they definitely have just random standards where they'll just come out of the blue.
Oh, yeah.
But I found most of them that do the high power requirements, though, the reason why we didn't go with the 24 volt is the high power requirements, typically they go up to 44 to 56 volts. Mm-hmm. They step it up. They're not staying at the 24 volt for anything when you're really getting up to that 30, 40 watts.
Yeah, no, I think some of the LTE stuff, we even saw something like approaching like 60 or something like that. It was like really like far outside the bounds of what we normally see. I forget who the LTE provider was, but definitely we were having some challenges in understanding what are we going to do for the PoE piece to power these radios in the tower.
Exactly. And so just for that, to being able to send the power, that large power, the long distance, most of them step up. Yeah. Are you finding that true about MikroTik as well? I know Ubiquiti definitely is that way. Mimosa, I mentioned Mimosa. I know Cambium. Those are the ones that I'm seeing go that route.
Yeah, I think MikroTik, I think most of the stuff we see in MikroTik is in the 24 range from what I've seen. You know, a lot of their radios and a lot of their stuff are all, they build their radios to mostly fit in with what their switch PoE offerings are, which I find more commonly, I think, in the 24 volt range, if memory serves, than we do into those higher ranges. But they're starting to support that. I think the latest, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, because you spend more time in the PoE world than I do, but I think the latest switches had some higher powering offers as far as the voltage in the latest CRS 300 series.
No, they're 700. Well, they're 400 watts and soon to be 700 watts.
Yeah,
and they do active passive on the same port, which is fantastic. When the 48 volt comes out, or the 48 port version comes out later this year, it'll be a wonderful solution for environments that can use that. And for what it's worth, my Facebook feed is going nuts over. They want to know more about your little injector, your midspan. It's like you're not giving them enough information, Tyler.
All right, I'll tell you what, everybody. So we've been talking about the MUM. Derek and I are going to be at the MUM on Friday, and we're going to live stream again. And this time I'll be ready because to be totally transparent with everybody, this showed up at my door after we've been designing and working on it yesterday afternoon. So I slapped it into the rack all day yesterday afternoon. I got it in. I haven't been able to set up the demo. But for the trade show, I'm going to be setting it up. For the MUM, I'm going to have it all set up as the demo where you can come up and you can manage the port and turn on and off things. So we're going to have it ready, and we'll do a full product demo Friday afternoon. We're looking at about 3 p.m. Derek and I are going to live stream right out of the MUM. And we'll do a full demo, and I'll try and have some assets ready for everybody. So sorry, I don't have it all ready.
Well, you just got to have the demo sacrifice. You know, the demo gods. You have to have the appropriate sacrifice to make your demo run smoothly. Whether that's a blood sacrifice by cutting yourself on the rack as you're doing it, whatever that is, you have to have some kind of a demo sacrifice for the demo to go, successfully.
Okay.
Are the buttons big enough that you can wear gloves?
Ooh, on there? That is a great question.
Because they're in this world, there's guys with gloves and drills, and guys with computers and laptops and switches. And
That's a
I can
great
see
question.
I can see the technician role being vastly easier because he can just make sure he's got enough power to his radio, and then he can let the network guys work on whatever they got.
Very cool. And that's actually a very good point. As I'm looking at it, we hadn't designed it specifically, but the buttons sit proud and they're spaced far enough apart that you should be able to get in there and push the buttons even with gloves on. That's a great point. And we're showing it in this 8-port configuration, by the way, Derek, but we can go all the way up to 24-port if we need to. And our goal is to make this product modular. So you can buy it as an 8-port device, slide in a second piece to make it 24 or 16, and then go all the way up to 24.
Do you have any pricing information or availability information?
Pricing, like I said, I just got it, and so I'm going to keep everybody in suspense. I'm sorry, but I'll be ready. I promise, Derek.
Big reveal.
He's gonna hold me to it for Friday. I'll be ready to talk about
the
pricing and availability.
PoE Club for Men.
These are great questions, and frankly, we've been working so hard to try and get this technologically get it out and make sure it's good and solid. That I've got all the information pulled up. It's just not ready to go prime time yet. So.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you for keep the questions coming though.
Put him in the hot seat.
And the cool part is we specially made it so it's got you could just do a plug connector in the back and then a screw terminal connector, so you could really juice
Is it DC
up.
powered?
It is DC powered. So what you would do is you'd buy your own power supply that allows you to come up with the configuration that you want, because the big question that we always ask, and the reason why we've always kept our mid spans and our power supply separate, is because you walk into a situation where some guys need the full 2,000 watt 24-port power supply, but that's a huge investment. If I'm doing 3 or 4 high power radios or 3 or 4 lights, do I really want to invest in 2,000 watts of power?
Yeah.
And so we intentionally have kept them separate, so we're not constantly changing out power supplies and getting 6, 7 different UL certifications. You can get one UL power supply. And I'm going to reach out to my guys, some friends who I've met multiple times, Solara. They've agreed to help me build a nice power supply kit that'll be a 1U spot just for this guy. So I'm excited to.
Cool. Speaking of that, I noticed that the depth on these is really, really shallow. So where
Yes.
we have a lot of clients that have very, very specific mounting challenges as far as the depth of an enclosure, or they're really, really space constricted. So I mean, the fact that is a really, really slim profile, I think, is good, because that's a huge challenge for a lot of people.
That's good to find out. We like the slim depth, and we always try and keep our products as tight as we can. It makes it a little harder for us, but that is another reason why you don't integrate the power supply. You use up more rack units, but you also don't go deep.
Sure.
And I don't know how many of you guys have actually physically, talking about technical people, I don't know how many people have physically manhandled a deep rack device in. Interestingly, I don't know why, but people have just donate servers to me. So if people out there watching, do not do this. I've got 2 servers that are, that 3-4 foot deep deal, and to get them in the rack is a physical and challenge of just trying to get it in there. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that you do this, but once upon a time we took a Cisco 6513, which stands about that high, so we're talking about a third of a rack.
Yeah.
And we had to use a 2x4 to leverage it in because there weren't enough people to get it in the rack. So we literally had you really should be using a server lift for this if you're doing it right, but at the time we didn't have it, so it was a warehouse. So we grabbed a 2x4, and so getting those larger things in the rack is not easy.
Yes. And it means you have to get a different rack configuration. That's a challenge.
For sure.
What else do we have coming from everybody out there? This has been great. This is a great conversation.
To do a little bit of a backtrack, Jim on Facebook wants to know if there will be a specific pricing reveal on the Switch or the Manage Injector at MUM on Friday.
Yes.
What details will be revealed about the product?
I will come ready to give a deadline to say this is when the product is we're gonna have it ready to go live, and I'll come out with the pricing. I'll make sure I'm ready for that. So I'm gonna be up late tonight, hammering away, taking pictures, getting all the assets put together.
Yeah.
Everybody, Because there's nothing worse than being like, oh yeah, this is it, and then you get some like dark, shady picture of a product. You need to people want to see it and they want to be able to feel it. So, but come to the mum and play with it, feel it, and then we'll also do that demo with a live one. So we'll give the full feature set. You'll see us turn on and off things and be able to play with it. And I think that'll be a good experience.
Very cool.
All right. So, any other good questions for us?
Not at the moment. I think we took care of all the ones that came in.
Keep them coming, guys. I'm going to throw one out here that is near and dear to me. 24-volt PoE. Like you guys can tell me what your experience is. When I get out there and read the chats and interact with people, there's a lot of anger and angst around the passive PoE world, especially 24-volt. That I don't understand. Personally, I think 24-volt PoE is fun. I think it's very useful for things. What do you guys, are you seeing that is this the future of 24-volt PoE coming to an end, or is there still runway for 24-volt PoE in the market?
So I'm going to say, and then I'll let Derek comment on it further, I think a lot of it, again, has to do with where you are in the world. So I think in the U.S., we're seeing a lot of products that are not built for 24-volt PoE, so or 24-volt passive. You're seeing a lot of things that a lot of WISPs are using, and some other things where they're not in that space. They're having to deal with different voltages and different standards, and so they're looking for something that could be more all-encompassing, because that's where the radios are going. Now you go elsewhere in the world, and you go into Africa or South America or some other places, and you're still going to find a lot of that. And you're going to find, because you do have different standards and different regulations. So most of the angst that I see around that is mostly North America. I don't see as much of that coming from Europe or South America or places like that. This is mostly, I think, a North American thing. Now I'll punt that over to Derek because he's our PoE expert.
Yeah, I'm an expert. No, he's right. I don't hear hardly anything in the around the world with it. If they've got it, it's really whether or not their infrastructure. If they started building with 24-volt, they want to keep going that route because they understand it. You go, in a lot of cases, these operators go with what they know. If they know 24, they stick with it because they get it. And in the States, it's just different. Bigger, better, faster. Now, This is where my ignorance is, Tyler. I mean, they can't, I don't know if they can do less with 24-volt that they can't do with 48-volt. I just know that that's what they're thinking.
Well, I'll give a couple of perspectives on it. Active versus passive, and this is coming from my perspective. I know if you asked guys at IP Cam Talk, I would be stoned and run out on a rail for even proposing some of this. But passive PoE really plays a role in when you're looking for simple architecture that you know is going to be dedicated just to PoE, which is why the radios and the backhaul world works very well on that platform, because it's not like some guy's going to climb up 30, 50, 100 feet on a tower and start unplugging network cables and plugging it into his laptop to try and do weird things with it.
Right. It's very purpose-built.
It's very purpose-built. And it also works well in that Wi-Fi access point space or the security camera space, because, that's just not a space. You're not going to do anything with that network drop besides power device with it. And then the simplicity of your PoE adds value, because the more complicated you have, the more likely it is to go out or to be problematic in troubleshooting. The nice part about passive PoE is you plug it in and that thing is on.
Right.
It's cooking.
Sure.
You know it's going to work. Where one of the big challenges and why our PoE testers do very well is because people are sitting there fiddling with it and going, I plugged it in and now it's not working. Why isn't it working? So passive plays a role in that. 24-volt also plays a role because it is very cost effective. It's just a very cost effective way of doing things. And if it's okay, I'm going to take a minute. I'll show you where we've invested in 24-volt PoE because I believe in it, because I think it is a good product line. Let me swing this over to here. And I'm going to turn our camera back on again, and I'll show you our on our table here a little selection of products that are designed to help. And I think the big challenge is education, right? Derek pointed out people don't know about it, and they're nervous about that space. But if you're in the 24 volt passive world, a couple of things that we've invested in that we're very excited in, for example, are our 24 volt midspans. And what's exciting about this, guys, this midspan will do up to an amp worth of power on 24 volts, which is a little bit unusual. So you can get a full 30 watts of power per port on our midspan, and that supports MikroTik and Ubiquiti products very well. This is an interesting device, though. If you span the gap between these two devices, span that gap between traditional PoE and 24 volt PoE, which is an important gap to span because you don't always have the right products. This guy here, what it's designed to do is it takes 24 volt PoE and converts it into 48 volts with an inline device. And it does it very cost effectively. So if I have a 10 watt device like a camera, I can throw this guy into my Ubiquiti injector, or I could throw it into my midspan or switch that is 24 volt and output 48 volts at 10 watts. And
so instead of mixing and matching my devices on the back end, I've got something that if I know that 80% of my switch is going to be a certain type of PoE, I can come in with one of these guys, and I'm not having to redesign the entire world every time and add all this different gear because I can solve that problem with, something that drops in.
Exactly. It's a one inline device because and what I tell people is pick the one you're doing the most of. So let's say I'm doing a MikroTik installation. I got 24 volt devices all over the place, but I got this one axis IP camera.
Yeah.
And it just had the features that you wanted. You could throw this guy into that mix, and it will do the IP camera without having to change up your whole network.
And that way you're not designing for the outliers. Like you're able to put a sane design forward.
And maybe this would apply for you, Nick, in your questions. How do I handle that? And then the flip side is true. We also have this guy here, which is our it's a part of our GAT line. And what it does is it takes PoE. It can take up to PoE plus. And what I love about this, guys, it's auto detecting. So it'll output either 24 volt PoE or 24 volt DC, and it auto detects. So as soon as you plug in your DC device, it detects that you want 24 volts out of this. And we get a lot of calls for this for like broadcasting, and not broadcasting, like announcements, announcement systems, PA systems.
Sure.
Somebody's just doing something 24 volts. You plug this in, and you still get your network port. It works, no power on it, and you get 24 volt power out here. Or if you plug right into it, you go straight to 24 volt PoE, so you can still support your Ubiquiti devices. And that's so we made a commitment to the 24 volt space because I think it's a cool space, and I think globally, to you and Derek's point, there is a space for 24 volt devices used correctly.
Right.
And frankly, I mean, it tells a lot that companies like MikroTik and Ubiquiti, who are the guys who are chasing on the heels of the big networking guys, they all start there. I mean, that tells you a little bit about something about that technology, and it's a space where I believe innovation comes from. So I'll get off my soapbox now, because that's my little soapbox.
That's your stand. Well, one comment I'll have on that is that from a scale perspective, as you mentioned, the simplistic element of 24 volt PoE and the cost effectiveness of it. If you're trying to solve a scale problem, if you're only trying to get a few hundred devices, then maybe it doesn't make as much of a difference. But if I'm trying to get a few 100,000 devices at scale, now you're talking about a really strong use case for a simplistic, cost-effective solution when you're having to deal with that scale. And there are, in the world of IoT, and again, going back to energy, infrastructure, and some of these other IoT applications, there are a lot of people that have that challenge, that have this massive scale challenge of small, inexpensive devices.
Okay. Cool. Maria, what do you have for us?
I think that 24 volt passive PoE is a good start for someone who may not know a lot about PoE in general, or is just starting out, simply because one of the major factors you said is cost effectiveness. They probably don't want to spend a whole lot on a new infrastructure if they're setting up, especially just something one-off for themselves, or because it's simple. There's 1 volt. There's not a whole range for 44 to 56 like the other standards. So it's passive, then it'll turn on. It's simple for them. So I think it's a good choice for those just starting out. Personally.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, any comments we got coming in from the chat line, or do we want to change topics?
Yeah, I think it's good. Nick just said thanks for all the information. He said I think we addressed his concern with having the combo of both on there, and Tech in the City Honolulu I think was referencing if we'll have the price reveal and everything at our booth during MUM, and yes, we will have all of that on display for you at the MUM on Friday.
Fantastic.
Question, just for me, are you going to cover what 80?
Oh, sorry, Derek. This was my bad.
Are you going to cover what 802.3 BT is?
No. That's a great transition. So yes, I can definitely cover that. I'm going to cover the PoE standard. So if now's a good time.
Is the T for Tyler?
Yes, T is for Tyler. That means I own the standard, actually.
You're on the standard.
I better be careful. There are actually lawsuits going around about this. So let me go ahead and get this queued up so that I can talk about that. So yes, I will go into the PoE standards. So let me swap over here, and we'll talk about that.
So you're going to pull the standard up, and we're going to read it verbatim? Is this a bedtime
we
story?
We are. This is the standard that you can sleep to. So, a lot of people want to know about PoE standards. And we did talk about Arcane. We talked about the 24-volt standard, which is very cool. And I'll get to that again. But what I did want to share for our audience today is, and Derek did a great thing, he said, tell us about these standards. And they are a little bit dark, right? I mean, to your point, if you go and read the IEEE standard, it could take you a day just to read all the details. And what do you really need to know, right? So what I do, we have a blog. If you go to the PoE Texas website, under the Learning Center, there is a PoE Basics Guide. And it's got this chart up, so you can grab it, you can download it, keep it, whatever you need to do. But I'll give you the summary. The real simple answer is the original IEEE standard is the IEEE 802.3 AF standard, so Alpha Foxtrot. What you need to know about it is that it can operate up to 12.9 watts of PoE, and it does an active negotiation, meaning if I have a PoE port and I plug that into something that's non-PoE, it does nothing. Or the bigger problem that a lot of you face is if it doesn't have the right response or there's some conflict at the other end, you can still plug it in your device and you're not going to get anything out of it either. So there's a little bit of knowledge of mode A versus mode B, polarity, that sometimes need to happen. If you have a full IEEE standard device, it should be able to negotiate most anything. And we make sure our products that are splitters or end devices, they can negotiate a lot of different things. For that reason, what do you find this on? You're going to find 802.3 AF PoE on your IP cameras, your IP phones. You're going to find it on smaller devices. For example, we use it a lot for powering iPads and tablets that are less than 10 inches. If you have any kind of device, I'll give you a rule of thumb. If you can hold it in your two hands like this, most likely it's going to be 10 watts. If you're starting to struggle to hold it, that's when it's going to go up to the 802.3 AT standard. So the AT standard is similar to the 802.3 AF, but it goes up to 25.5 watts at the end device. You're going to see this on your multi-radio Wi-Fi access points because you want to get MIMO or you want to be able to get a longer distance run. Some of those bigger radios, they require 802.3 AT. Your PTZ cameras and cameras that have infrared lighting on them, they step up into that AT range as well. And then, interestingly enough, exciting for us is it also is where the new bigger tablet and tablet computers are running at. Some of the smaller ones, the iPad Pro 12.9 inch, the Microsoft Surface Go, some of the smaller Lenovo tablet products, they fall into that range. And what we do is we convert PoE to USB Type-C to power those devices. And by the way, for those of you who've been following us on this, I have the prototype sitting right next door that does PoE to USB Type-C power and data over just one network cable.
Wow, very cool.
It's here, the prototype is here. I'm putting it on the tent bench to test it today. And then, so that's what you're going to see most of is 802.3 AF, 802.3 AT.
So I want to make sure I understand the last part that you said. So I can take USB-C power and data and then put it on a twisted pair and then come out the other end as USB-C. Is that what you're talking about?
Actually, it's even better than that.
Okay.
You can put your tablet device on a TCP/IP network. So it's not just an extender.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'll give you a great example. Right now, this iPad that I am using right here to manage our live stream is actually being powered, and it's running over a network communication to our switch rather than wireless.
Oh, wow. So you basically got what is essentially an Ethernet adapter built into the USB by doing that. That's a neat trick.
Yes. And so what that means is you can turn an iPad or a tablet into a media player.
Sure.
Or a server of, a lot of people use them for room controls. A lot of people use them for check-in kiosks. And you're not on a wireless network, so you don't have to rely on that infrastructure either to clutter up your Wi-Fi network or for security purposes.
Yeah, I can see point of sale would be a great application because, point of sale, a lot of them will be wireless, but not all of them will be. And so that, like you said, you could get some of that load off your wireless network if you do have drops.
Exactly. So that's one of the exciting things of where PoE is really growing. And then I'm going to swap over here to show you now the 802.3 BT standard came out. So for a while, everybody was kind of playing around with some non-standard stuff to do 60 watts, 60, 70 watts. And that's great. And that's where the passive standard, so the passive standard is kind of this very wide-ranging definition. You can have people have done passive PoE from 12 volts all the way up to 56 volts. Sometimes they have it active negotiating something, and then it turns on others. Sometimes it's straight passive. And that one, you're going to want to do a little bit more education. You're going to want to learn about what both end devices need to operate on. And the ones that we see most of the time are Ubiquiti, Microtech, Mimosa, Cambium. Your radios, like we've talked about.
Sure.
They do that a lot. But you can come up with some very interesting applications if you're willing to play with passive PoE. And we do it all the time. It's also known as, when you do PoE up to 60 watts, you typically go from doing PoE on part of the wire to PoE on all of the wire. And I'm not sure if I'll try and explain it. 802.3 AF and AT run on 2 twisted pairs. 1, 2, 3, and 6, typically. Okay. But if you're doing 4-pair PoE, you can do things like 60, 80, and 90 watts of power, and that runs on pairs 1, 2, 3, and 6, and 4, 5, 7, and 8. And so that's why they call it 4-pair PoE or 4P PoE. And then, and now, just at the end of last year, October, IEEE came out with the 802.3 BT standard, and that's a very exciting standard. However, it's a little bit complicated. I had to, some of the guys from Analog Devices came by the office, and they helped me explain it to me. The long and short of it is, you can get up to 79 watts of power at your end device with IEEE 802.3 BT, which is very exciting. That governs things like lights, televisions, blinds, laptops.
And that's also over 4 pairs.
And that's also over 4 pairs.
Okay.
So one of the things that not many people know, we did a passive PoE USB-C device because some people came in, like some of the bigger Lenovo's, they needed 41, 42 watts of power, and it's outside the 802.3 AT range, but it's not quite, do you really want to try and get up to that Cisco UPoE? And I'll cover UPoE in a second. But we do have a PoE, passive PoE device that lets you do 41 watts on USB-C, which is very cool.
So you said TVs could be powered by this thing. So like I'm going to say, I'm sure there's a million use cases for this, but let's say I'm a casino. I've probably got, I've got a lot of screens around the place and I've got a lot of wireless infrastructure. So you can have a common infrastructure for power and data for those by using that standard if I'm going to power my, flat screen TVs and things like that. Or, I'm sure there's 1,000 other industries that would benefit from that. But that's being able to power devices other than, network is the real advantage of the BT standard. That's the big use case.
That is the big use case. In fact, I brought up TVs because we're coming up with a 32, 36, and 42-inch television set and I'm working with guys like DirecTV, Spectrum, so you could just basically you put in your network hardware for your whatever you want to have for your services,
right.
Sling TV, Dish. You can get that all backward infrastructure in the network, and then just run one network cable out to a TV that you can just slap on a wall, plug one network cable in the back, and you're done.
Wow.
And that's an exciting one that that is in development. It's in process, and I'm hoping to get out in the next few months.
Yeah, I could see that in the hospitality industry, the hotel industry, the advertising industry. I could see all of those verticals really jumping into that standard with both feet if you can start making the infrastructure simple for deploying.
Exactly, and that's where this midspan that we've created is a key linchpin to that, because your alternative today, and the standard that most people know about, is Cisco's UPoE, and they've really advertised it, and it's been by and large your only alternative for a long time. But there's a challenge with the Cisco UPoE. It's only Cisco stuff.
No, say it ain't so.
No, that's shocking.
No, it's something that Cisco built that you can only use Cisco for.
Exactly, you can. People have developed products. They get on the Cisco standard and they develop it for UPoE, but it is costly to do so because the way the Cisco UPoE standard is, it works with 802.3 AT up to 30 watts, and that allows you to turn on your device. So you have to design your device to turn on PoE. Then it has to do a link layer data protocol communication back to the router switch and say, I'm actually UPoE, and then the Cisco switch will send out up to 60 watts.
Okay.
So all that communication, including the link layer data protocol, it adds complexity and adds cost to it. But it's very good, and it's been the standard that everybody has had up until now. But the nice part about the new BT standard is that takes that problem away and makes it more of an industry standard.
So UPoE and BT solve essentially the same problem, but one is proprietary with vendor lock-in, the other is not.
Yes. Okay.
And
that's what's exciting. And now, one of the challenges you find with the BT standard is you have to be careful. There are some legacy devices that were close to BT, and BT should accommodate those legacy devices. But every once in a while, you're going to find that conflict issue come up. So definitely, and I can do a whole hour on this, the difference between signal signature and dual signature. But let's just say it's starting to get complex at that point. So
fair enough.
We do have a question from Tech in the City. First, he wanted to say Tyler Andrews is the PoE guy. And then he asked, could you use an iPad to control MikroTik device using their new iOS management program over Ethernet with your device?
I would expect that you would be able to, because they just demoed that. There's a new piece of software. So normally when you manage a MikroTik, you're going to use SSH, or they have a proprietary Windows program called Winbox. And at MUM Europe, which we were just at, they released a new piece of software for Android or iPhone on the Apple ecosystem, where if you're on a tablet or phone device, you can manage and configure a MikroTik device. Now, I would assume, since what you guys were using as an adapter, like to get into, to take your tablet and make it an IP-enabled device. I mean, we'd have to test it, but my assumption would be yes, absolutely. Because as long as you have an IP connectivity back to that MikroTik, then you should be able to do that for sure.
Could we test that out at the MUM?
We probably could.
Yeah, because I could show you. I mean,
with the appropriate demo sacrifice, we can make everything anything work.
More reasons to stop by our booth at MUM.
That's right.
All right. Well, I'm excited about this. So we're going to set it up. We'll get some MikroTik devices all set up. And
we're either going to be hailed as heroes or it's going to go down in flames. Either way, it's going to be fun.
It's going to make it exciting. Well, so speaking of which, guys, what is it that we need to know about the MUM? So, Derek, give us your take. What's going to be exciting at the MUM? Let's wrap. We're going to wrap up on the MUM because we've done our hour here. But what are you excited about at the MUM?
Well, the some very observant people figured out that that MikroTik's new product announcement is 15 minutes longer or 30 minutes longer than it was in Europe. So there's a lot of murmur about expecting some new hardware from MikroTik, which will make people very excited. I know we're going to see their G Pen PoE stuff. I'm pretty confident we're going to see more of their LTE stuff, and that's but I don't. No one wants to talk about their future because Microtik could change their minute. Well, they changed their mind Thursday morning in Europe on what they were going to do that day. So we'll see what happens. But there's certainly a lot of excitement there. I still want to touch your little PoE box and see how that works, because I see powering Chromebooks over Ethernet and getting them off wireless as a way to make Chromebooks useful in certain applications. But that's the big thing. Other than that, the Microtik event, if you've never been, is a pretty it's a hacker space. There'll be a guy there. If you remember, Kevin, there was a guy there that he made his router blink a light because that's what he wanted to do. I don't remember what he did it for.
No, somebody did it like for like what was it? It was like
it was like a police light
float in a tank or something like that. Like they were trying to monitor some physical environment, and I think it was like the water level of something. And so they were using a combination of PoE and some kind of basic analog sensor, and the voltage level determined the sensor, and he was able to, I think, script it on the PoE port that when the voltage changed, a certain network action kicked off. So he's basically turning this Microtik router into an array of physical sensors for environmental things. That was very interesting. So like Derek said, you find it's like almost like a combination of a hacker space and a maker space, because you have all these people with ideas. And that's back to your point about what is Microtik. The most unique thing about Microtik is, because it's so cost effective, you can literally make anything out of it. You can use it to make all of these different things. And so people will come to the MUM, and the greatest thing is the networking of people, and I think that's a part that I can't stress enough. Is it's cool to interact over Facebook. We all chat with each other. We're all buried in our phones, but that personal interaction of like actually talking to someone and like hearing how excited they are about an idea or a concept, face to face, same way I could have done this over video, but I thought it'd be cool to come sit with you guys in Austin and be here, because I think that personal interaction is what people really like about these networking conferences, and seeing what everybody else is doing and the sharing of ideas. And I think to Derek's point about the presentation being 15 minutes longer, one of the little reveals that we saw in the release notes of their operating system that they were working on is that they recently added support for 25 gigabits as an interface speed. So the expectation is that, I don't know if it'll happen at the US MUM or another MUM, but that it's probably realistic to expect that a 25 gig router or switch is going to come out sometime very soon, which is a big deal for Microtik, because we're up to about 400 gig in Ethernet, and they have stuff even beyond that in dev for where we are in the world of Ethernet and network communication. But Microtik has traditionally only gone up to 10 gig. So one of the things that we haven't used Microtik for is if you need a 100 gig backbone or a ring or some of this massive network capacity, that would not be the right choice, because they just haven't released that. Their play is, we're going to make it economical, we're going to make it available to the masses, and it takes a while to develop a product that will do that as those higher speeds. But they are starting to step up into the higher speeds now, and so that's going to be a very exciting thing, because again, dynamics like data centers, ISPs, large enterprises, this changes the available options for them, and you can do some cool things with that.
That is very cool. Well, I'm going to do a shout out to Dr. Z's and the hookup. You guys keep this in mind when you're doing your network infrastructure, because like you were saying, Derek, cost effective. Those are real home automation guys. Mm-hmm. And I watch their show because I'm just that nerdy.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you could expect when you go to the MUM. I mean, a bunch of guys getting together and just being like, well, what could I do with this thing? Yeah. Could I make it, do this? And it is exciting like that. So.
Yeah.
And I'll put our plug out. Derek was awesome. He when I talked to Derek a few weeks ago, I called him up and said, you come to the MUM? And he said, yes. And the first response was, where's your party?
Where's it?
Because
straight to the point.
And so Derek has been coaching me and teaching me the ways of the master party. So Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. right next door at the MUM, we're gonna play some cornhole. We're gonna have drinks. And we're going to have a good time, and you're going to get to nerd out with a bunch of guys. Derek will be there. I'll be there. Unfortunately, Kevin can't make it because he's got to get home to some family stuff. We all respect and admire.
I'll be there with you in spirit. Do a live stream.
We'll live stream from the party. No, I'm just kidding. But so I'm excited about the MUM. I think what we're going to see is some very interesting people, some makers. I know ATX LED is going to be there. I know a couple of the different WISP guys that are coming, and I think it will be an exciting opportunity not only to see MikroTik devices, but to see where those MikroTik devices are being applied in some unique and unusual ways.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun about the users meeting. And frankly, I don't think it's exclusive to MikroTik in the sense that if you're not a MikroTik user, if you don't do MikroTik networking, don't write it off. Come and give it a shot if you're here in the Texas area. If you need a free pass, reach out to me. I can get you in for free because we have a few free passes left over from our allocation as an exhibitor.
I think we have a few as well if we need any more.
Yeah, so you just text us and we'll get you set up and you can get into the show. But come and check it out because, I would say, unlike, I go to Infocom. I went to CES this year. And my goodness, man, I walked for 3 days solid, like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and I saw like a third of the show.
It's like the Disney World of tech conferences.
Oh, man. And the lines were tremendous, and it was just like so many people. What you feel like you miss out on is that personal connection, talking to real experts and getting a lot out. And that's where the MUM, I think, adds a lot of value, is because when you go, there are guys like Kevin who are experts at doing network architecture, just wandering around chatting people up and having a good time and willing to talk and share their expertise. So I would say it's small, but it's really exciting from that perspective.
And we will just
if you're gonna be there and we didn't get to answer your question here, stop by our booth. Talk to us about it then. We're happy to talk about anything with you and answer your questions there. So we're excited about it.
Go for it, Derek. You were going to say something, my friend.
Well, we will actually have 5 engineers there because some of our customers get a chance to meet some of our new guys. So even though Kevin is departing us, the brains haven't left the building, even though we love his. But we will actually have a number of people there if people want to talk shop. We'll certainly have people they can talk shop with. But it is a networking show. Yes, it's a MikroTik focus, but everybody there wants to push protocols and power. That's really what they do.
In 3 languages, Derek, actually. We're going to have our multilingual team there. So if you want to talk Italian, want to talk Spanish or English, we since we're so global and we do so many different languages, we're going to have a multilingual network engineering team there.
Benissimo.
So for all the Italian networkers,
there you go.
Yeah, for all the Italian networkers in Austin, please come.
I know of one. That's here. Shout out to my buddy Lorenzo. He's probably off. I saw him. He was at NASA, I think. He's not even watching this, but he rented a Hemi and got off the sidewalks of the streets of Italy and is on the wide open spaces of the roads of Texas in a Hemi somewhere. So if he doesn't get arrested for violating the speed limit before he makes it here, we'll have at least one Italian networker.
Fantastic.
So, Tyler, I have one question. Any promises on delivering me wireless PoE? You've promised a year ago. I want more.
Well, I did see that at CES. It's a little bit harder, but Li-Fi is coming, and that is going to be light transmitted Wi-Fi. And then there are some guys out there, and I need to pull up my notes. Linus Tech did a show on it that I thought was very cool, and I reached out to them and said, well, you're not cool enough yet to talk to us, but Linus is. But what they can do is they beam light, infrared lights. They use an infrared tracking laser to beam enough power that you can power small devices. I think you're talking 6-7 watts.
Wow.
But
Wi-Fi out? You can do Wi-Fi out of lights now?
Yeah, Li-Fi. You haven't heard about
No,
Li-Fi?
I haven't. No, I spend all my time in the backbone of the network, so I don't get to always make out to all the really cool edge cases.
Well, the use case is you got your phone in your hand, and this phone is looking up and seeing the light, right?
Okay, yeah.
And rather than doing radio frequency waves, the lights could be doing their light frequency shifting, and a camera
so you're talking
good
about
enough.
actual data. So instead of putting the data onto an RF frequency, you're putting the data onto a frequency of light.
On a frequency of light.
Wow,
and the
very cool.
when you're getting up to that gigahertz range, the eye won't see it, so you can have your lights flashing information down.
The human is never going to visibly detect.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a thing. It's coming. I imagine it's a little bit complicated because, we've got 3 devices. We're all staring at our phone. How is it communicating to all 3 devices? It's got to sort some of that.
So first I had my compact fluorescent lights, and that was cool. And now that's no good. And now I have to have my LED lights in my house. So now we're going to have Wi-Fi in all my lights. So that's, wow.
Your lights are going to have to be able to talk to your devices.
That's how we get to the $75 light bulb in our kitchen.
That's it.
Yep. That needs tech support.
Needs tech support. Well, Maria, any last questions from our audience out there? We want to make sure we take care of our great audience. You guys are fantastic. You've stuck around for an hour and a half, and this has been great feedback and great input.
Yeah, it looks like we don't have any more incoming. We were able to answer all the ones that came through at the beginning of the show and toward the end. So I think we have all the good questions so far.
Well, y'all, we really appreciate Kevin and Derek making time, especially flying all the way in to sit in the PoE Texas live studio.
A great studio, I might add.
Thank you very much. And so we're really glad to have you guys here. Any last parting words for our audience out there?
No, I think if you can come to the MUM, we'll look forward to seeing you at the MUM. If not, watch the live presentations because there are going to be a number of them. I'm going to be doing one on BGP convergence using free-range routing, talking about how to improve BGP convergence on your MikroTik edge routers. So check that out. And then you can find us on iparchitects.com. You can find us at IPArchitects on Twitter, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you go there, we're also very active in the Wisp Talk group in Facebook if you want to check that out.
Fantastic. And Derek, what do you have for us, buddy?
Oh, I just have a party on Thursday night. And so, you know, my job is not necessarily to be, I do the best I can to be a nerd, but, you know, we do have an event we've got planned, and it'll be good fun.
Yes.
And I do have a few pranks planned.
Ooh. Beware.
Yes.
All
every
right.
year.
Well, let's wrap up the show, everybody. So, thank you again, Derek and Kevin. Great feedback. The conversation was fantastic today. I feel like I learned a lot, and I'm really excited about the MUM. So, for all of you out there, visit Kevin and Derek at IPArchitects with a .com, IPArchitects.com, and then like and subscribe the show if you enjoyed the show and if you want more of this kind of information. Maria and I are always happy to engage with you on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. So reach out, like us, subscribe us, tell us what you want to see, what you want to hear. We've already got that project coming up where we're going to see if we can control MikroTik on an iOS device on a wired network, and I'm very excited about that. So thank you again for all your questions, and we're looking forward to getting out our announcement about this new high-powered midspan at the MUM. And we will see you at the next live show. You guys have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
And I'm going to get us over. All right. Sorry about the earpiece. I noticed you had to swap ears.
No, it was just kind of I didn't have it in the right orientation, so I was trying to make sure that it was like starting to fall out a little bit. I was like, I don't want to lose my earpiece.
Got to screw that in right.
Yeah, I don't care what Derek says anyway. So.
I couldn't hear what Derek said.
I forgot to
this
announce.
died on me.
Oh no!
But I was able to still view them on here. I have it both open, so.
Okay.
You need PoE power.
It had PoE power, but I didn't think it got all the way up there yet.
Oh, gotcha.
It wasn't at 100%.
Yeah. And I forgot to announce the next live stream.
There you go.
The next live stream is going to be very cool. A small, exclusive. Let me cut off the live stream here.
This guy.
Yeah, I don't want to step on it.
Oh, no.
That's all right. It's got the